Wagwan Jamaica. Welcome back to Centrally Speaking. That one I got nice.
What is Centrally Speaking? It is the program that opens up the conversation around important matters of economics and finance, matters of national importance that have an impact on your life. I'm Sheena.
And I'm Anna. Glad you could join us again, and welcome to those of you who are joining us for the very first time. I see you. We invite you to stay with us.
We have an interesting show lined up for you today. On today's program, we'll be talking to two guests, Marek Petrus and Paul Badertscher.
Marek is an external relations consultant with deep expertise in financial and economic policy communications. He has been repeatedly engaged by the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, advising central banks in Asia, Eastern Europe, and Africa. Marek is a former director of communications and chancellor and director of the General Secretariat of the Czech National Bank in his own country. And Paul has been in central bank communications for over 30 years and is the Bank of Canada's Director of Media Relations. He has been a journalist covering central banking for Bloomberg.
They are here in Jamaica taking part in the second regional central bank communications workshop held at Bank of Jamaica recently. But before we hear from Marek and Paul, we first want to hear from you. It's time for Street Check.
In my experience, because I am on most of the social media platforms, and for me, I would say it helps them to generate new clientele.
Access. I feel like being a part of social media, you're automatically broadening your reach and just having the wider access towards potential market, just even greater persons who might see your brand, be a part of your brand or want to be familiar with your brand. Social media just easy.
In this day and age where everything is moving towards technology and becoming more and more dependent on social media is very vital to a company. It's all about marketing these days. It's all about getting in the right set of clients, and with social media able to target your specific audience as to apply to whatever businesses they're trying to enhance.
The value where the business add to social media is more exposure, and people can more in tune to what is in the stores and what will be required for them to purchase.
Being on social media and marketing and that sort of thing allows to enhance business because you reach other avenues, you reach a wider audience in terms of persons outside the Caribbean and the wider diaspora and that sort of thing. So the marketing allows you to sort of reach a lot more persons.
So, Sheena and I did a thing.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
We're always doing something.
Right. So, Sheena went to the Czech Republic.
Yeah.
She met a guy.
I did.
I went to Canada. I met a guy. Sheena, what's your guy name?
Marek Petrus.
Right. And mine is Paul Badertscher. Right. So they said they what? Centrally Speaking.
They
so
do.
So we said, what? We're going to invite you to come on the show. So they're here. Welcome.
Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Really good to be here.
Great to be here.
All right, so fun joke aside, you're here because of?
Second Caribbean Central Bank Communication Workshop.
Oh,
Precisely.
Okay, good. And
So-
speaking of communication,
Yes, Anna,
what Jamaican words have you learned?
tell us.
Whenever I'm here and I start to talk like a Jamaican, everybody just dead would laugh.
Okay. All right. Do you have any? Marek? In terms of, say something in Jamaican.
I learned like a very important saying,
Yes.
and I whenever I want to respect anyone,
Yes.
I say enough respect.
That is good. That is
enough
good.
respect.
Not bad at all.
No.
Yes,
It
that's
sounds,
good.
it sounds like they're integrating well.
Well, good communicators.
All right. So, on the note of the conference, share with us, how has it been going so far for you?
It's been going perfect. You know, the level of engagement that we see from the participants is amazing. It just shows that it was something that was really missing in the region, and we are so happy to have created this forum for central bank communication professionals to meet annually.
Okay. So Paul?
Yeah, I mean, you might be thinking, why is a Canadian at a central bank Caribbean conference, but there are a lot of ties between Canada and the Caribbean, Canada and Jamaica in particular. And I find it really useful to come down, and it's not just me bringing lessons from the first world about how things work. I come down, I learn a lot. I learn a lot from the people here. It's great.
Okay, so what are some of your key takeaways?
I think for me, just how similar the challenges are for central banks, trying to communicate with the public. We've just been through a really tough time in the world. We've just had a lot of inflation. And you know, it's really important for central banks, big country, small country, rich country, poor country, all over the world, really important for central banks to be talking to their people, letting them know what they're doing, letting them know that, you know, we're under control. We've got this under control. We're going to get inflation back under control. Everything's going to be okay.
Yeah, in a way that they can understand. All right, so Marek, this question is for you. How has central bank communication evolved, especially considering the digital age?
Yeah, it's evolved a lot. And this program that Paul and I are sitting on is just perfect representation of how communication for central banks has changed over the past decade or so.
True.
Yeah, because in the past, you know, central banks, what they did, they talked to journalists on one hand, and they talked to analysts, economists, and they wanted to use these journalists and economists as the conduits or the translators of their cryptic and complicated messages for the general public on one hand through journalists, or like through economists to markets and investors. No longer necessary. No longer necessary. You can have centrally speaking program. You can have other programs. You can have social media platforms, and now you can talk to the general public directly without this middleman, because this middleman sometimes have their own interests, right?
That is true.
They not always replicate and transmit the messages perfectly. So it's much better for central banks to go directly to the general public and to use various, you know, layers of their communications to achieve whatever they want to achieve.
So Marek, share with us, what are some of the principles which guide effective communication from a central bank?
Yeah, I mean, over the years, very broad consensus have emerged. There are 5 of those principles.
Right.
First of all, it's a principle of clear and candid communication. Central bank needs to, in a very understandable manner, respond and explain its actions, policies, and forecasts and outlooks. Second principle, it needs to reach all segments of the population. No segment of the population should be neglected by central bank communication. Third principle is that communication needs to take place regularly. That you know, this is something that disciplines the central bank on one hand, you know, creating all these internal organizational mechanisms that communication is coming out in regular intervals. And second, it also helps with predictability of central bank communication in the markets, in the public. Fourth principle is a very important principle of equal access to all information, specifically to information that is market sensitive, right? You, as a central bank, cannot allow the perception that someone out in the public or in the markets received sensitive market moving information ahead of the time. So central bank needs to create mechanisms and systems to be able to spread all information at the same time to all audiences and give them this equal access, because that ties to the reputation of a central bank. And the fifth principle is the principle of consistency of communication across speakers of a central bank or across tools, channels, and so on. So you cannot really have a governor speaking outside of the capital and give a message, and then you have another program, maybe program like centrally speaking, when you create and deliver a different message. That would create confusion, and that is not desirable. So central banks need to make sure that they speak in a coherent and understandable manner.
Thank you.
Yeah, fully agreed. Right, so Paul, this question is for you. Right, so you currently lead Bank of Canada's media relations, but before you were a journalist who reported on Bank of Canada. So you know you have dual perspective. So what role, you are an expert, what role does journalists play in shaping the views of a central bank in reporting on central bank policies?
You know, Marek talked about how a lot of central banks are trying to bypass the media, talk to people directly, but there are still a lot of people who get their news from the radio, from the TV, from newspapers. And so I think having spent a lot of time reporting on the central bank and then coming to it, I think it's been really helpful. The journalists who cover us on a regular basis, they know me, I know them. I know the pressure that they're under to try to get a story out. I know what, you know, the kinds of things that they need to understand what we're trying to say. They know that, and I know that we can't be putting out information that's really complicated and nobody can understand. We need these folks to give our message accurately. They need us to get the story. And I think working together, we really try to make sure that both sides are happy.
So on that note, Paul, how do you, in terms of managing the relationship with the media, how do you ensure that your policies are adequately represented?
So one thing we try to do is give journalists a little bit of time with our information ahead of the time that it's published. So we have a room at the Bank of Canada, you know, we call it a lockup room. It sounds kind of nasty, but it's you know, we give them coffee. So we allow reporters time. If the governor is giving a speech, we'll let them take a look at the speech ahead of time. And they've got time then to read through, to ask questions. You know, if there's something they don't understand, they can talk to us, and we can explain what we're trying to say, and then they can write a good story, and write it, and then the moment that it's supposed to be published to the world, everybody sees it at exactly the same time. So it's you know, it's in our interest to make sure they've got the story right. They don't want to write a story that's kind of dodgy or got some, you know, misinterpretation in it. So we have this opportunity to talk to each other before the story goes out, and they can ask any questions they want, and it works pretty well.
That's good.
So speaking of getting the story right, how does Bank of Canada particularly adjust or differentiate its messaging, its communication in times of high inflation or volatile economic instances?
Yeah, so really important these last couple of years. People here in Jamaica, people here up in Canada, it was the first real shot of high inflation that they've had in a long time. The Bank of Jamaica has been quite successful in keeping inflation under control until this last until this last episode, where all around the world central banks were dealing with inflation and our people were dealing with inflation. And so we really needed to step up our communication, say a lot more, tell people that we understand you know, what's going on, and we know how to fix it. The cure isn't going to be all that pleasant, but we're going to fix it, and we did it. But we have to tell the people that, you know, we're on it. We've got it. Policy is going to work, and it does work. Again, it's not always easy, but the payoff in the end is going to be worth it.
We are learning about central bank communication here on Centrally Speaking. But you know what time it is? It's time for a break.
Welcome back to Centrally Speaking. We have two international guests with us today, Marek Petrus and Paul Badertscher. They're both central bank communications experts. So Marek, talk to us a little bit about how central bank communication impacts public confidence in monetary policy.
Sheena, you say how it impacts. How do you say in Jamaica it impacts it a great deal?
Nuff.
Okay. So
wicked.
So simple answer to your question is nuff.
Okay.
But seriously, yeah, if a central bank shuts its door and sort of like says, you know, okay, we are technocrats, please trust us, that asks the public, please trust us, we know what we are doing, like let us do our job, it won't be successful. So communication is key to building public trust in central bank, its policies, and its policymakers. In other words, communication serves as a kind of bridge between the public, the people, and the institution policymakers. And our conference, our regional workshop, was held under the overarching theme, our currency is trust.
Yeah.
So that just reinforces the importance of trust as the goal of reinforcing the trust in the institution for every communication professional from a central bank.
So Paul, tell us a little bit about how the public influences the communication strategies for Bank of Canada.
Well, I think we try to do as good a job as we can of listening, because communication is two ways, right?
Yes.
It's always got to be a two-way street. So we're always listening. We're listening to what the public's telling us directly, and we're listening to what the public's saying. We're listening to the public in the media. We're listening on social media as well. We're trying to hear what people are saying. We're trying to understand their concerns.
Yes.
And if we see some messages going around, something, some bad information, we'll do the communication that we need to sort of, no, here are the facts, here's what's going on, and try to make sure people, understand really what's happening. We watch what the public is saying, we see their concerns, and we'll try to react to that to make sure that they've got the information that they need. And not always is it good information, not always is it something that people want to hear, but we'll listen to what people are saying and we'll respond.
So Marek, Bank of Jamaica would like to think, that we are the best at central bank communication. I'm sure you'll agree.
I do agree. I do agree that you are at the front.
Ooh, okay. All right, but joking, fun and joke aside, as we say in Jamaica, are central banks doing much better at communication? Are central banks across the world using all the channels available? And most important, is it making a difference?
Yes, the answer to your questions, to both of your questions, is yes, resounding yes.
Okay.
Central banks have become much more active in using various available channels, including, for instance, we had a delegate from the Bank of Uganda in holding town halls across the country in various languages. There are 65 languages.
Are you serious?
Oh my gosh.
In
Uganda.
Right.
So they have to actually embrace that, and they have to go to the region and speak the language that people in that given region understand. They go there physically. So they are not only using various sort of channels like media or social media, traditional media and social media. They are actually physically going several times a year with the town hall, with the governor and other central bank officials, and they engage with the general public there in that region in the language that they can understand. And yes, the answer to your second question, Anna, is that it is making a big difference, and it is helping the central banks through this direct and repeat and active engagement with the public through these various channels.
Yes.
It is helping them to gain that understanding and over time build that trust from the audiences. And here I want to say that our regional central bank communications workshop is extremely critical to enhance this ability for central banks to be able to use all these available channels and explore new ways of reaching out to the public.
Yes.
Because in every country there is, or in every country or for a given monetary union, there is only one central bank, right?
Yes.
So if you are a communication professional in that central bank, you are lonely.
Yeah.
You have no one to talk to. What works, what doesn't. How do you learn, right? So that was the key insight that led to the establishment of this regional communications professionals network and this communications workshop, which is the annual meeting of these professionals, and they exchange ideas, they exchange practices, they exchange experiences, and they learn from each other, because that's the only way they can learn and enhance communications going forward. And here I should probably say enough respect for the BOJ, because they are indeed emerging as the top notch.
In all seriousness, the people here are fantastic, warm, friendly, very welcoming, and it's not a surprise to me that there's real close ties between Canada and Jamaica. Okay. A lot of Jamaicans in Canada, a lot of Canadians come down here, and it's obvious why.
Okay. And Marek?
Yeah, I mean, I would only be repeating what Paul said, but I have to share and admit that when we were preparing the regional workshop with the team from the BOJ, I have to say that I was always looking forward to that meeting. Because, like, you know, engaging with people from Jamaica, and that was my first glimpse of, you know, what Jamaica is gonna be, because this is my first time in person in Jamaica. I was already getting the taste, you know, in those preparatory videos, and actually coming to Jamaica, landing here, and interacting with the people on the ground in person. It's just beaten all expectations.
So viewers, there you have it. Marek Petrus, International Consultant on Financial and Economic Policy Communications, and Paul Badertscher, Director of Media Relations at Bank of Canada. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Welcome back. You are watching an international version of Centrally Speaking. Here are the key points from our guests, Central Bank Communications experts, Marek Petrus and Paul Badertscher. It's now time for the Fast Facts. Number 1. Central bank is the generic name given to a country's primary monetary authority responsible for the design and implementation of monetary policy. Number 2. Bank of Jamaica and the Bank of Canada are both inflation targeting central banks. Number 3. Inflation targeting is a regime used by central banks to stabilize prices where an inflation target is set and the central bank uses its monetary policy, those tools, to meet the target. Number 4. Jamaica's inflation target is currently 4 to 6%. And number 5. The 5 key principles of central bank communication, according to our expert Marek, are: Number 1. Messages must be clear and candid. Principle 2. Communication needs to be consistent across officials and all communication channels. Principle 3. Everyone should have equal access to information at the same time. Principle 4. Information sharing should take place regularly. And Principle 5. Reach all segments of the population. Now, that's it for today's Fast Facts. I'm Anna. And that's our program for this week.
Follow us on X and Facebook at Central Bank JA and on Instagram at Central Bank Jamaica and on BOJ's YouTube channel. You can also visit our website at boj.org.jm.
And please, we beg you do, also invite you to send in your questions on X or Facebook.
And of course, tune in again to Centrally Speaking next week at the same time right here on your station when we will have another special guest.
So as Paul said, Irie.
I'm Sheena.
And I'm Anna.
Thanks for watching.
See you next week.
Centrally Speaking is a production of Bank of Jamaica.